If you sell on Etsy, you've probably heard about keywords and how important keywords are to getting found. But what some people, in fact, many people don't know is that keywords could be just a secondary factor as to why you aren't getting seen on Etsy. In fact, I believe that there's one thing that is not keywords that is highly overlooked by beginners, which is usually the main reason that they are not being found on Etsy. So in today's video, we're gonna go over what this factor is, how it actually plays into your ranking on Etsy so you understand the Etsy algorithm better. And we're gonna go over my top tips to making sure that this helps your store and doesn't hurt it. Etsy is a highly visual platform, meaning your thumbnails have so much importance to them. And this is what people often overlook. When you go through bestsellers, you're going to see very, very good mock-ups. But a lot of times when I go and look at a lot of people's products, their mock-ups are extremely subpar and they might not even realize it. Imagine walking into a store, you already know the brand, you already have an idea of what they sell, they have good reviews, your friends have them, they trust you, but they have two sweatshirts. One is folded beautifully. The other one is either the exact same sweatshirt or just slightly different, but it is thrown in a pile in the corner of the store. Guess which one's probably gonna be picked up? The one that looks nice folded or that they see on a model. But a lot of you watching right now might be like, okay, yes, your photo makes people click, but it actually doesn't play into your ranking. That's what keywords are for. But actually, no. Thumbnails are going to help you rank higher if they are done right. Yes, keywords tell Etsy what you're selling, tell them who to show it to. In fact, yes, Etsy does read your keywords and they query match. So they will show you higher if someone types in that exact keyword into the Etsy search bar. But the thing is, you can have perfect keywords, but if your thumbnail is not great, you are going to drop to the 100th page of Etsy search. There are many factors that go into how Etsy ranks your specific listing. But an extremely important one is your listing engagement rate. That's how many people are clicking on your listing, favoriting your listing, buying your listing. And the first step of that is clicking into your listing. And the only thing that someone really has to go off of from the Etsy search page is your main thumbnail. So that is the window into your listing engagement rate. So this can explain why someone might have the best design. They might have the best keywords. They spend forever researching their keywords, yet for some reason, they're showing on the 20th page of Etsy. Etsy, when you first release a listing, boosts your listing for a bit to try to understand how shoppers are going to engage with that listing. If they realize that everyone is skipping that listing, which is because they don't like the listing photo oftentimes, then you're going to start ranking lower and lower because Etsy doesn't want to show listings on the first page that people are not interested in. And this can also explain why sometimes you see bestsellers and you go into their titles and tags and they're absolutely horrible, yet this is ranking on page 1. That's because their listing quality score is high enough for Etsy to determine that they actually want to show this to more people, even though the relevancy and their keywords aren't exactly up to par with other listings. So that is why a really good thumbnail can possibly save subpar keywords. But amazing keywords and keywords research cannot save a bad listing thumbnail. And even if inside your listing, you have the best price, the best shipping prices, the best shipping times, you have a wonderfully crafted listing, they're never going to see that because that thumbnail did not drive them to actually click into that. So now we're gonna cover the top mistakes I see when people are creating thumbnails and my best tips to creating listings that rank high and convert with a good thumbnail. My first tip is make sure that your thumbnail is clearly legible as both a rectangle and a square. If you go through different parts of Etsy, you're gonna notice that sometimes you see people's photos in a square format, but sometimes you might notice that you also see them in a rectangle format. On the homepage, you see a lot of rectangles, yet on the search page, you see a lot of squares. On shop pages, you'll see squares, but if you're on the Etsy app, it also appears as rectangles. So one thing I'm always doing is making sure that my listings are both clear as the rectangle and as the square. And I'm gonna show you how I do that. In Canva, or whatever program that you use to create your mockups, I've created the square and the rectangle version. So I've actually made my artwork size the rectangle, which is 3000 pixels by 2250. But what I've done is I've gone and dragged in guides here, and you can drag them out from the corner over here. And then I've made a square version within this rectangle. So I'm able to view both views at the exact same time. So that way I know that no matter which way or which aspect ratio that this is viewed, it is going to be clear to the consumer. My next tip is make sure that your mockups look as realistic as possible. There is quite often when I see someone who created a mockup, they put their PNG on their mockup, but the design runs off the shirt. There's a giant wrinkle on the way that makes this not look realistic. Maybe the model is turned sideways, but the design is not, which just screams that this was not an actual photo, which is going to deter a lot of people from trusting and clicking into your listing. So many designs like this, where they're tied at the bottom, if you have a full length design, you're gonna see, like at the bottom here, there's major wrinkles going over this design, which makes it look really not realistic. And I'm also finding that the contrast is not that large. So this is kind of hard to read. So I would maybe do something like this. I've tilted this slightly to match because she is turned slightly. I want to make this look a little bit more realistic. I have it on a mock-up that doesn't have many wrinkles at all. It's on a black so that the contrast is very high between the person and the design, so it's very easy to read. And I also lowered the transparency just a little bit because when it's super bright, things don't actually print this way. They're going to be a little bit duller in person when it's actually printed, so I always bring down the transparency slightly. My next tip is if you have a USP, a unique selling proposition for this listing that might make people buy from you over a competitor, to make sure that it's actually seen on the mockup. Sometimes you'll see mockups that have a label that say customizable, ships next day, embroidered, so that people know that this is a higher value shirt against the competitors just from the thumbnail. Because otherwise, if they can't tell exactly from your photo, they wouldn't know until they clicked into your listing. But again, that's one step past the thumbnail. We have this one here, for example, that says ships next day. We have this one, which also says next day shipping, and they put another one down here. But this again comes back to the importance of checking both rectangle and square ratios because it's cut off and I can't see it. This one lets you know that it's custom with any grade or any subject so that people aren't just looking at the photo and saying, okay, that's not relevant to me. People know that it's customized. Honestly, this one is not 100% needed. I only do this if I have embroidered products or if I have custom products, but the customization is not very obvious from the first photo so that people know while looking that I have this extra value add. But you have to make sure that you can actually promise and deliver on what shows. Otherwise, people are just going to leave your listing. So for a lot of us print-on-demand sellers, I don't put ships next day because I can't guarantee a ships next day, while some other stores might be able to, so they can use this to try to stick out against their competitors. The next tip is to actually do your research when it comes to mock-up styles and mock-up colors. On Printify, you can go to Printify Insights. I believe you do have to make 20 orders a month to unlock this, but I'll share this one with you guys. But you can actually see what are the most popular selling colors for different products. So for the heavy blend crewneck sweatshirt, the Gildan 18,000, we can see that the sand is the best selling color, followed by black, ash, white, forest green, sport gray. So I'm not probably going to use a main mock-up that's a Heather Kelly because it's not a commonly purchased color. It doesn't appeal to a majority of people. I'm trying to use the colors that are going to appeal to the most amount of people. Majority of the time, I'd say about at least 80 to 90% of the time, if I have a black mock-up as my thumbnail photo, people buy the black variant because that is the photo and color that drew their attention. And for your types of mock-ups that do well can really vary on the niche that you sell in. For example, what type of mock-ups do well for a fishing shirt might not really be the same as what does well for a mama shirt. So I always make sure I'm researching my niches and trying to see what types of mock-ups actually appeal to them. Like fishing shirt, you're gonna see things very different than from maybe a more women's focused type of shirt. We see kind of more of these flat, unstylized photos, way more plain than versus if you looked up again a mama sweatshirt or a mama t-shirt. So make sure that you're doing this research before spending money on buying mock-ups or spending your time creating mock-ups. Everything that I do starts with research first. My next tip is after you post your listing, make sure you are going to view it from your homepage so you can go to your Etsy shop page, find that listing and make sure that it's appearing well. Because there's ones like this one where someone wanted to make sure that you could actually read what the shirt says. But it's so zoomed in that I can't even tell what product this is selling on. So I'm way more likely to click on another listing than this one. But on the flip hand, if this is so zoomed out that I can't actually read what the shirt says, I'm also not likely to click on it because I don't have a clue what the t-shirt says, what it means, why I care about it. I'm not gonna click on it. So make sure you're viewing your thumbnail and making sure you can tell what the product is and what your design fully says as well. Here's an example of a mock-up that people probably wouldn't buy. This is for a digital download, but if it was for a print-on-demand one, it probably wouldn't be purchased. This teacher one here, the girl is completely turned sideways, yet the design is not turned sideways. There's major wrinkles and shadows and highlights in the sweatshirt, yet not in the design, screaming that one, we don't know how this is actually going to print. I'm not going to trust it because obviously it's not real. So again, make sure it looks realistic. Also nowadays, be very careful with buying AI designs. Etsy has said that your listing and your photo needs to be of the actual product you're planning to sell. So if you have a Gildan sweatshirt, you can't be just putting a picture of any type of sweatshirt. It needs to be a Gildan sweatshirt that you're using. And when people are using AI, you're not making a copy of that exact type of product. And a lot of the times, what the AI spits out is not the same fit, feel, or fabric as what you're actually going to be printing on. You will not see many best-selling designs on Etsy using AI. A lot of people can spot AI within seconds. I immediately can tell if a photo is AI generated. And again, it's against Etsy's terms of service, but it's also gonna cause people not to trust you. They're gonna see that your photo was not real. They're gonna know it's not really printed. They're not gonna know if that's the exact product that they get. So I steer clear completely from AI mockups now. And if you want a way to create as realistic as mockups as you can using Photoshop, I actually use Photopea, which is the free version. I'll link up my tutorial on how I do that. I do that for my more complicated designs or when I'm posting things to social media, for example, that I want to make sure look super realistic. So I'll link that up next for you guys. And if you're ever unsure if something looks realistic, ask a friend to take a look at it. There's been many times where I became a mock-up blind and I created something and I thought it looked super realistic and I asked my husband if that looked real and he said, absolutely not, which humbled me, but it made me redo a lot of my mockups. And my last quick tip that I'm gonna throw in here is A/B test your mockups. A lot of times, if I can't decide between two mockups or two different colors, maybe I wanna test a black mockup and a sand mockup, I'll duplicate my listing and I'll test both. Again, I'm always testing. So mockups is probably the main thing that I A/B test in my store. And a lot of times you'll see one get tons of traction while some get zero traction, even though it's the exact same design, exact same keywords. The mockup can be the difference between making sales and not making sales. P.S. If you want to get all of my mockup tips written in a checklist format, along with over 130 different tips on how to increase your views, visits, ratings, get star seller, everything that I know on how to make sales on Etsy in a checklist. I've created the ultimate Etsy checklist that you can download from the description below. We have multiple pages on here for different steps of your journey, including different settings that I have. I have different examples, different templates that you can use. Again, you can get it from the description below and use the coupon 50 YouTube to get $50 off. That's almost 60% off the checklist. Just drop it below. I hope this helps you guys. Let me know. I worked so hard on it, and let me know how this helps you. Thank you guys. I hope this helped, and I'll see you next week.